Welcome, everyone, to the CUNY Graduate School of Public Health and Health Policy here in Harlem. I'm Lynn Roberts. I'm a member of the faculty in the Community Health and Social Sciences Department, and I'm also the Associate Dean of Student Affairs and Alumni Relations. Welcoming also those who are joining us online. And we are here in the ground floor of what is also, we have 4 other floors above, and this is also the home of our Harlem Health Initiative, which you'll learn more about at the end of the program. I do want to invite anyone who would like to add a memento, something that's meaningful to you, to our altar there to my left, which is in honor of those mothers whom we have lost during pregnancy, during childbirth, or during the postpartum period. We are hosting a series of 3 book talks. This is our first one to really celebrate the second edition of this wonderful volume, Birthing Justice, Black Women Get to Know. And before we begin, I would like us to take just a moment of silence to honor all whom we have lost, to what should not be happening in 2024 in one of the most rich countries and providers of healthcare in the world, and one of the premier cities providing health care, not health harm. And so with that, we're just going to take a moment to reflect on what has brought us here, what has birthed this volume. There are bathrooms down the hall to the right. Please go at any time. And also there are refreshments. We will probably expect people to help themselves at the end after our panel and a discussion. But if you feel so inclined and you just need to get something, feel like this is your home, and do so. Don't be shy. Just, this is a gathering because we really want to share with you some stories of our journeys, our collective and individual journeys related to this issue of Black maternal health and well-being. And at the same time, we want to share the harm that is happening. We also want to lift up when things have gone, well enough to celebrate and have joy and hold on to both. And I have asked each of our contributing authors and our editor to think about what brought them to what we call birth justice. And birth justice is an offshoot, if you will, was at a time in the 1979 when people did not regard young parents favorably. We were considered something that you prevent from happening. And I like to turn that around because at 17, I was in school, I had good grades, I worked, and I took care of a household. All very adult responsibilities. My parents were divorced and I lived with my father. And that was a choice I made when my parents separated. And he had health issues that I needed to take care of a household when he was hospitalized. I worked Saturdays and Sundays in a nursing home. And I had a boyfriend. And we had sex. And we got pregnant. Those things happen. And it wasn't because I didn't know about birth control. It was primarily because I actually knew a lot about birth control and I did not want to take the pill. I actually thought it would be harmful to my body. So I decided to choose that method of birth control that is known for making parents, called the rhythm method. And I will just to put that in perspective, fast forward when I intentionally wanted to get pregnant, that paid off. And turned out to be an ectopic pregnancy. So, you know, what does it say? Sometimes God has a sense of humor. So all that to say that pregnancy, which I then moved to DC, then it was time to live with my mother. And, you know, not that my parents were thrilled about me having a child at that age. My child was born just a few months before my 18th birthday. So I didn't, so it was, and back then, 18-year-olds were treated like 21-year-olds today, right? They raised the age. So, but if I look back to my grandmother's generation, my grandmother had her children at 16. The only difference was she was married. So we kind of had invented this phenomena of teen parenthood being a bad thing, a dangerous thing. But I'm sharing this in this conversation only because my pregnancy and how it was treated by society and how my birth was handled had everything to do with my age. I wouldn't say it was my race as much because in DC, my doctor was Black. The hospital where I gave birth was majority Black. I gave birth at Howard University Hospital. And still, there was something I think that had to do with maybe the fear that because of my age, that this pregnancy and the birth was problematic. And so when I went into labor and they took me they actually took me for an X-ray to measure my pelvis and determined that I could not give birth because of my narrow hips. And that was the basis for my C-section. Okay. After I gave birth, I was, they gave me a shot to dry up my breast milk without my consent, never talked to me about it. And they really pushed the formula, you know, you got these big baskets and all these freebies. But I really felt that it had mostly to do with my age. And at that time, DC had one of the highest infant mortality rates in the country. So C-sections they thought that was the thing to do. Luckily, my daughter, who turns 45 next week on Tuesday, was very healthy. I had a uncomplicated pregnancy. Again, my age did not mean that it wouldn't be, right? So all this to say there was a lot to do and that was 1979, 45 years ago. And that was my path into birth justice. I didn't have a name for it. But I can reflect on it, having that framework within the reproductive justice movement. I went on to adopt 2 children and then had my second child as a VBAC 18 years later. Second child that I birthed, but my 4th child. And I could tell a whole lot more stories about that journey and, you know, learning about the maternal mortality rate and morbidity rates in so many parts of this country and around the world too. But it's striking that we experience it here when there is access to care. It's another thing when you're in a country that doesn't have access to care, but we've always had a particular type of care that has been virtually erased or at least pushed to the margins. And that's the quality care of our midwives and that practice that kind of was really pushed to the side in order to create a more medicalized approach to birth. And for better and worse, there's some good things about having hospitals and being able to intervene. But there's something lost. And why can't we have both? And why can't we have the continuum and choice to choose a birth that we would like, which is one of the pillars of the reproductive justice movement, which is the right to have a child and choose the conditions under which you will give birth or create a family. Because you got to expand that. Because you can create a family a lot of ways, not just by giving birth to little humans. So that's kind of a nutshell of my journey. And I've been working here in New York City all of my professional life, and really cut my teeth in public health on the HIV/AIDS movement, where there were certainly issues around people's reproductive rights and justice not always being served in regard to who could have children. The first study I worked on was about fertility-related decision-making if you were HIV positive at SUNY Downstate Hospital here in New York. And that's a hospital in Brooklyn that is going to close. And how many families will be impacted by the closure of a major hospital, teaching hospital, operated by the State University of New York. So there's a lot more I could share with you about the state of things. New York State recently released a report on maternal mortality and morbidity that we'll make available to all of you to read in depth. But I just want to say that there's so much work to do to turn the tide of Black maternal mortality in this city and in this country. And you're going to hear from people from all parts of the United States today and over the next couple of days, because we have 3 of these talks that you're invited to join us for. I did want to mention that this phenomenal anthology, should I call it an anthology, but a book of, many contributors who I first encountered a book called Battling Over Birth, which you'll learn more about from Chinyere Oparah. But it just stirred me that there was this collective of folks doing the work and connecting to the community to be a part of the work as well. The work of telling their stories and making the right, really directing others to understand the complexity of what's going on with Black maternal health and that they have the solutions themselves, and using a very liberatory research practice to do so. So that was the first writing I read by Black Women Birthing Justice, BWBJ. And then they also have the first volume of this book, and now we have this to treasure. And from a lot of different perspectives, very rich, ways of talking about the lived experience, but also the practice, the research, the policy making, and also not just limiting it to here in the United States, but also transnationally. So with that, what I've asked each of our guests this evening, some who came as far from California and from Connecticut, where it was snowing last evening, and Philly. So this is quite a mix here, right? And we wanted to have each one of these book talks in a different borough of New York City, with as many of the contributing authors who were close enough to be with us, because these are the communities that are impacted by what we call a maternal health crisis. And yet at the same time, these are the communities that are serving Black mothers and birthing people as well. So I hope that you will learn a lot from each of our speakers here, and when we go to the Bronx and we go to Brooklyn, that you will get your own copy of this book to learn about those who couldn't be with us, because we could have filled this whole room with some of the contributors. There were a lot who wanted to come, and we couldn't have them all. But what I've asked each of them to share with you is to first tell you their journey. I gave you a little snippet of mine, but I didn't contribute to this volume, and I think they can say a whole lot more. So they will each share their journey. Of course, Chinyere is going to give you more of an overview of the collective, as well as, you know, how all of the books evolved and came to be birthed. And we will also, and then ask them to each talk about their current engagements and activities, because they're all doing phenomenal things. And then to share a call to action that they each would like to impart to us here. So I'm going to stop, and we're going to go in turn. There is a digital program, so I'm not even going to do the formal introductions other than to call their names. And they'll go into, I think you're actually in the order. So we'll go down the line, and again, make yourselves at home. After we've gone through everyone, we will open the floor to your questions and comments and reflections. And thank you. So with that, I'm going to introduce to you Dr. Chinyere Oparah.
Can we hear it for Lynn? You know, first of all, it's such an incredible honor to be sitting next to Lynn Roberts. This is a person who I think of as a quiet powerhouse, right? Very quiet, very humble, right? She's never out in front. She's always behind organizing to put someone else on the stage. And yet, when you really hear her story, she is the person who's been behind so many of the things that we've seen for Black health and for Black maternal health and for reproductive justice. So can we hear a bit of a louder round of applause for her? Thank you. We have to honor the people who do the work, especially those who do it really quietly. Thank you, Lynn. Thank you for making this space possible. And I think the fact that we are going to be in 3 communities and that we're going to be partnering with community organizations is indicative of the kind of work that you do. And it's so in keeping with the spirit of Black Women Birthing Justice, which is the organization behind this book. So thank you for making that possible. I want to thank Dorothy and the Harlem Health Initiative as well as the CUNY, Deborah and the Harlem Health Initiative and the CUNY's School of Public Health, SRJ, who are also doing this important work to make us be here today. So thank you so much for that. I want to call out a couple of other names just because they're not here, but they will watch the video, and I want them to know that we did remember them. First of all, Dean Berkenkamp, he's actually our editor at Routledge. Dean was the person who reached out to Alicia and me and said, hey, the book came out, you know, at that time, it was about 7 years ago. It's been one of our best ever sellers. And it seems to me that a lot has happened since. In fact, the book has been part of seeding a movement. And so isn't it kind of time that we had another edition? And so he had that visionary idea. And I want to call his name out because, hey, we need allies. And he's a great ally. And of course, I have to acknowledge my co-editor, Alicia Bonaparte, who's down in Southern California right now, for really being an incredible partner in this project. And every single member of the Black Women Birthing Justice Collective, because it's a collective that have had many folks, Sayida, you're on it right now, many folks have come through that collective. And I think that's what makes community organizing live, is not when it's the same stagnant group, because sometimes things happen. I mean, some of the younger women who were part of it at the beginning now have 3 kids and they're doing other things, right? Like stuff happens, life happens, but as long as the group keeps bringing in new blood, then it's going to keep being a movement and really moving forward. So just wanted to name those things. I would just love to know who's in the room, and we are acknowledging you in Zoom land. So those of you who are out there in the live stream, hey, thank you for being here with us. We love you. I would love to know who here is actually a mama. How many mamas in the room? Put your hand up if you want. Okay, mamas in the room. Any grandmamas? Okay, we've got to acknowledge the grandmamas. How about any birth workers or health workers? Anyone in healthcare? Okay. Taking care of the community. Anyone who wants to become a birth worker or a healthcare worker, maybe? Okay, awesome. So a few students. Any more students in the house? Faculty? Any faculty? Okay, we've got some professors. All right, awesome. If I didn't name you, we love you too. So so many of us, all of us, right, are touched by this issue of birth justice. And I just wanted to name that we come to this experience from so many different angles, but we all belong, right? We all belong in the movement for birth justice. How many people here consider themselves an advocate or an activist for birth justice? Okay. So by the end of the evening, it's going to be 100%, right? Especially you in Zoom land as well. All right. So just wanted to, and you know, one of the things that's beautiful about the way Lynn created this space was her invitation for us to tell our story, which is very much the way that Black Women Birthing Justice got started. We invited 100 Black women to come and sit in a sharing circle and share their birth stories. And we asked them a simple question: what was your vision for your birth, and what was the reality like? And out of that came everything, right? So much can come out of the power of stories, because we see our shared humanity and we hear what was really hard and traumatic and we never want to have happen again. But we also hear the courage and the power, and also the beautiful experiences too. And so that gives us hope to go on. And so that's why we really believe at Black Women Birthing Justice in the power of story. So I'll share a little bit of my story, and Lynn at some point is going to be like, time to stop, because I can talk a lot about this. So really, Lynn, do let me know when I have like 2 minutes left. Okay, and also my story has a lot to do with the young woman at the back. So let's all just turn and wave it on Yeka. Say hi in the pink and brown, my daughter. So I was not involved in birth justice. I did not know the name birth justice. It wasn't something that meant anything to me. In fact, I didn't think there was any problems with the maternal health system before I got pregnant, right? A lot of us don't know. I just assumed that you get pregnant and the health system helps you and you have a baby, right? So 14 years ago, I got pregnant, and within about 6 weeks, I became very ill. I actually had a condition called ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. And normally it's something that will pass with a couple of days. What happens is that you start generating a lot of fluids inside of your abdomen. And I was 6 weeks pregnant, but I looked about 7 months pregnant. I swelled up. It was very scary. So I was taken to the hospital. They had me there in the bed, and they had to puncture a hole in the side to let this fluid drain out, because otherwise the pressure would be too much, right? So now I'm lying there and I'm hooked up to everything you can imagine, got this thing draining out of the side of me. I'm in terrible pain, because when they went in, they weren't too far from a nerve and they couldn't take it out to change it because it could be a risk of infection. So I'm in terrible pain. I'm lying there like, oh my God, this is not what I thought. And I'm lying there and they're just like, oh, don't worry, this passes. Like, it's just something the body eventually will rectify itself. And they were giving me like these strips and everything like that. They're like, oh, it shouldn't be more than about 3-4 days. Definitely it'll start turning around. When I got to day 5, I saw the doctors coming in. They started looking more and more worried, right? Like, you can just tell the energy shifted. Now they suddenly started bringing everything they can imagine to try and like jumpstart my body. So they were bringing in, and then it got to day 6, day 7. And then at 7 points, somebody said, never seen it go on this long, which was not a good sign. Not the thing you want to hear. And by day 9, they said to me, we don't think that you and your baby are going to survive. And so our recommendation is that we terminate the pregnancy so that you can keep your life. Bearing in mind, I'm 40. This is my miracle baby, right? This is the one that I wanted. And such a struggle to get to that point. And so I had what they call that dark night of the soul. And it was nighttime. I had 24 hours to make a decision. So it's nighttime and I'm lying in the bed and I'm just praying and I'm looking out the window, and these night nurses who you never see during the daytime. So I'm wondering if they're really angels or night nurses. Really, because they're all like from all over the world. They're just like Nigerian, Senegalese, like, from like Central America. They'd come in and they'd say, they would sit, and it was like they had all different like personalities. So one would come and sit on their bed and say, you're giving up. You can't give up. God is looking up to you. Do you not believe? And then she'd go away. I was like, was she really there? Then someone else go, it's going to be okay. Like in another strong Dominican accent. I'm like, who are these people anyway? So I was having all this like spiritual guidance from the night nurses, right? And then I'm lying there and I'm praying, and I just heard this voice, and this voice said to me, you both deserve to live. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to take that on faith, because clearly I've been sent, lots of messengers, right? So the next day they come back and I said, we're both going to live. And I said, okay. I'm like, okay, but they're worried, right? I know they're really worried because now their solution is not going to kick in, but there's no other solution happening right now, right? So I'm lying in the bed and I got this strong sense that I had to get up. I'm like, but I can't get up. I'm like, hey, I'm plugged into the wall and everything imaginable. I'm in terrible pain. I've lost, by the way, 10 pounds, which is the opposite of what's supposed to happen when you're pregnant, right? But it was just a strong, overwhelming sense that I needed to get up. And so I just like lifted my legs. Have you ever had that situation where you lift the legs over the edge of the bed and like pull the thing out of the wall, like the power, pull myself up and I start like hobbling down the corridor. And I get to the nurse's station and they're like, what are you doing? And they help me to get back. And I lay in the bed and that was the moment everything shifted. And when the doctors came back, they said, it's reversed. The fluid started going down, it started draining, and somehow miraculously I was okay. Now, bearing in mind, I was sent home and I had to, like, it took like 7 weeks before I could actually go back to work. But nevertheless, like my body was turning around, right? My body was turning around and was healing itself. And, you know, my little girl was going strong, right? She was in there, she was going strong. And I knew she was a girl. I went and they said, well, do you want to know sex? And I said, no, I know. I've been dreaming. She's been talking to me in her dreams, right? And they were like, oh, you knew, huh? Because there she was, right? So, you know, that story for me in that experience was a sense of my own mortality that happened to me because, you know, I was super strong, healthy. I was the one, like, I do yoga every day, I'm hiking, all the stuff, right? All the stuff. I had excellent healthcare. I was a professor at that time. So middle class, like good income, you know, great environment. Like I didn't have any of those things they say are the reasons why, right? And yet I almost lost my life just by being pregnant, right? And, you know, the next step for me was, okay, now I want to push out my baby. And it was very important to me that I would be able to push her out. Because for my own personal story was that when I was born, my mother, unfortunately, because of the situation she was in, was not able to keep me. And so my experience in the hospital was being given from her into the system. And so I didn't want a situation where I had at any moment of separation from me and my child because I felt some anxiety about like, do I even know how to make that connection and keep it? Because I never had that. They say that you know what you experienced, right? But I never had that connection and I had foster mothers and right. So I didn't have that immediate like bonding, right? And I wanted to know that I could have that with my daughter. And so I said, it's very, very important to me that I be able to push up my child and I'm conscious, right? And I'm not recovering from surgery and that she's not got drugs in her system. Like we got to set everything up for success for us, for our first few days, right? And they said to me, well, you're an at-risk pregnancy. You've been in the hospital, you're advanced maternal age. We think it's probably going to be a C-section. And I said, are you not hearing any of the words that are coming out of my mouth? What does having been in the hospital 8 months ago have to do with having a vaginal birth, right? Like it's not equated. But the thing is that you get this label on your head of at-risk mother, and now you're the risk. What became clear to me, the risk is not to you or to your baby. The risk they're worried about is the risk of litigation to the hospital if you don't make it, right? Or the risk of bad publicity if you don't make it, right? So what did I do? Well, I am an activist. And so I said, they're telling me no, so they can't help me. So I need to fire my doctor and get myself a midwife, right? I mean, I'm reading on the internet by now and learning a little bit of something, right? So I find a midwife. And I get myself a doula Mama Linda, who is one of the co-founders of Black Women Birthing Justice. And we say, we're going to do this thing. However, they wouldn't sign off on me having a birth at a birth center because of my medical condition. So we decided we would create a liberated zone within the hospital, right? With my doula, my midwife, my support team, and me doing the thing. Of course, Anyeka decided that she needed to be posterior. Anyone had back labor? If you have had it, you know what it is. It's when they're the wrong way up, they're trying to come down at the wrong angle, and they just keep banging on you. Something. What is that? They're banging on the back of you. Whatever it is, it hurts. Like which actually, it's funny, but in a normal hospital situation, that means she's taking way too long to progress, which means you're getting the C-section, right? So yet another instance where, because my midwife was like, she just didn't say anything. She said, it's okay. She's a midwife. She's not been trained in how to cut babies out. She's been trained in how to help babies come out naturally, right? And so we just did the thing and kept doing the thing and kept doing the thing until she came out at high speed, finally. And they grabbed her and they popped it right on my chest, and her little head bopped up and down because no drugs in her system, right? So, because that happens is with the infants when they've been, through the whole, like, oh, we had the epidural, we had this and that, they're kind of woozy because they're all connected to your bloodstream, right? And she just started nursing right away, right? And that was that miracle moment. I don't think she's really heard this full story, guys. Hey, it'll be you one day, though. Much better experience. So, so that story for me changed everything. Right? I knew that number one, I shouldn't have had to almost die to have my baby girl. Right. Number two, I shouldn't have had to fight the medical system to have her in a way that honored who I am as a person and who I wanted us to be. Right. And so I knew I had to do something. And so that's the beginning of Black Women Birthing Justice. I got together with a friend of mine who was a younger woman, a youth activist, and she was pregnant, and then she was trying to have a home birth, and she was all like, some of you might know her mother-in-law, Hemba, who is a sort of one of the queens of reproductive justice and midwifery here she passed, but in New York. And so she was going to have a home birth, but Nonkululeko she was early. So Nonkululeko was on a plane trying to get there. And she was in labor in her bathroom. And somebody called, I think it was one of her family members, called the paramedics on her. And so they came, bang, bang, bang on the door. And in her neighborhood, paramedics can kind of feel like the cops. And they came bang, bang, bang on the door. And she said, no, I'm giving my birth to my baby right now. I'm in labor. I don't need to go anywhere. And they said, sign this piece of paper, because if you have a dead baby, it's not our responsibility. So, right? What does it mean to be a young Black girl who decided that you're going to have your birth your way, right? And so and she didn't go to the hospital, but she did have to sign that piece of paper. And so the two of us were like, wait, what happened? One minute we're like activists and we're empowered and we're doing all this thing, and the next minute, our most vulnerable moment, and it's all going terribly wrong, right? And so that's how we sat down. We said, okay, we're going to find out, is it just us? Or is this happening to somebody else? And so that was when we said, let's start these sharing circles and just invite. We go out in the playgrounds and just see Black mamas. Well, where you see us, the grocery store. Hey, can you want to come and share? And then we would have these sharing circles in a little church, which would give us this space. And about 6 to 8 of us would come together and just tell our stories, just like this, just like this, right? And it was so beautiful to hear those stories. And we cried together. And women would say, I've never told this story, because they tell you if you have a healthy baby, it was a successful birth, so stop complaining, right? And so it was the first time people had the opportunity to really tell those stories. And then sometimes we would all listen and somebody would tell the most beautiful birth story you could imagine, most moving, connective, empowering, lovely experience. We say, this is possible. This is why we're doing this work, right? We should all have that. Because you know what? It's hard enough being a Black mama in this world without having to recover from this and recover from that. And you had to fight, and they thought that your husband was making too much noise or being argumentative, so they threw him out as a security threat, or they told you had to have this, right? It's hard enough being a Black mama without recovering from birth trauma, from simply trying to give birth to your child, or recovering from almost dying from simply being pregnant, right? It's just hard enough, right? I haven't said half the stuff I was supposed to say. So let me just look at my notes. See, because I'm not going to wrap up. So let me just say that one of the things that Black Women Birthing Justice did was to create this definition of birth justice, right? And to really treat it as an inclusive movement. And we said that our vision is that every pregnant person has an empowering birth and postpartum experience, free of unnecessary medical interventions and forced separation from their child. We added that part when we had women come to the sharing circle and say, I don't have all of my babies because they took them, because I had a history of drug use. So they took them at birth. So we said free from forced separation from their child, right? And that honors their autonomy and maintains dignity. We aim to educate and inform, to document and share Black women birth stories in their own words, to raise awareness and to influence healthcare policy so that we can keep birth sacred. And so those are some of the things that we thought about. And we wanted to rebuild confidence in our Black and Brown communities' ability to give birth. Our pelvises have not changed shape or size. Why suddenly we have to be measured to see if we can push out a baby? For me, my grandmother gave birth to 8 babies in a small village in southeastern Nigeria, far, far from any hospital, with an indigenous midwife. And so for me, I knew that if my grandmother could do that 8 times, I think I can push one out, right? So I had that sense and strength in my own ability to give birth. And I knew that everything they were telling me had nothing to do with my family and my lineage and my history. And I think that's that sacredness of the lineage of Black birth that we all need to remember so that we can be strong and empowered and know that we can give birth. Um, what should I say? Just to wrap up. Yeah, I wanted to talk just briefly about the new chapters in this book. So first of all, we put out a call and we invited people to submit pieces for this book. So the first book was Battling Over Birth. That was where we recorded the stories of the sharing circles. So you should get hold of that one. And we wrote it up kind of like a human rights report. Like, this is what's wrong, this is what needs to change, and this is what you can do about it. So that's Battling Over Birth. So this book, we invited people to send in their stories. We also invited people to send in essays, like historical essays, because we wanted to understand and recover the history of Black birth workers, right? Analysis, like just anything that people were writing. And it took a while because nobody was really talking about this stuff then, but some people were writing and thinking, and others hadn't published ever before. And so we invited them to send stuff and we helped them to edit it, to make it to a place. So we have midwives and doulas and folks who've written in there. So that was the first edition. The second edition, so fast forward 8 years, and we sent out the call, and everyone knew about the book already. And there was so much that had happened since. Since then, we'd had the Black Maternal Health Caucus in the Congress. We'd had the Barbara Lee, Congresswoman Barbara Lee, who in California, we all know who she is. You probably don't. But anyway, oh, we do? Okay. Okay. Who was, really one of the leading folks in Congress calling for Black Maternal Health Week. So we have all of these things now. We have the momnibus, right? Like all of these bills to improve Black maternal health. None of that was there at the beginning. And birthing justice and Black women birthing justice was part of this national movement to make that happen. And so now we were able to call on some of those folks who we knew from this national movement to say, can you write a piece? And so we have a chapter on the Black Mamas Matter Alliance. We have Sayida and the wonderful work they've been doing with Black doulas have a piece. We have a piece on breastfeeding, which we weren't able to get in the first. I mean, there's so many exciting new chapters. So we really want you to have a look. We also were able to add more of a transnational perspective because it's just a global Black community, right? And so we have an amazing chapter by Nafisa, who is a maternal health activist in Zanzibar, which is a little island off of Tanzania. And that's a really beautiful, powerful piece. I just got back from there. We had the opportunity to go visit with them, visit and meet with the sisters, and we did a fundraiser. We were able to take some funds out there, and we're actually supporting them in their work. They're trying to create the first ever reusable sanitary pad distribution in East Africa. So reusable because that way young girls right now, oftentimes they can't afford the kind of expensive Western pads that we have here. So they use newspaper. It's not sanitary. And they have to end up staying home from school during their menses, right? And so this is really disruptive to them in their education. And so the women want to have something that is like practical, it's made with local fabric, and that they can actually sell. So these are the kind of things that we're able to do through, through this book, through the solidarity of this book, right? So we hope that you, get the book, that we hope that you stay connected with us. But more important than anything, we hope that you really understand and read the maternal health report for New York. What's happening right here? And get involved with those organizations so that you can make a difference, right? If it doesn't matter if you're planning to ever give birth or if biologically you can't ever give birth, birth justice is your issue, right? Because it's your sister, right? It's the experience of really birthing a community without trauma. We shouldn't come into this world with trauma. We should come in powerful and strong and able to go and do the work. So thank you again, everybody, for being here.
All right. Wow. So powerful. The question of what brought me to this journey. So, okay, my name is Sayida Peprah-Wilson. My background, I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. I'm also a doula. And I'm the executive director of Diversity of Bliss, which is a nonprofit in California. And we do a lot of work around so many things in this. I'm looking at my aunt who's in the front row, who gets to hear me talk for the first time about these topics because I'm here in New York where she lives. And something that I often say is that one of the reasons why I think that I am in this work is a spiritual reason, because both of my paternal grandparents' mothers died in childbirth. So her mother and father's mother died in childbirth, and my father's mother and father died in childbirth. So I was getting on a stage once as I was going to talk about the impact of transgenerational trauma on Black maternal health. And I was talking about understanding the legacy and the narratives of your own family as a healing device as well. Because I think of the fact that I'm here and that she's here and that my dad is here. And that even though they lost their lives, like we live on and they contributed even in their last, moments. And so, but I hadn't thought of myself, like I hadn't included myself into that fully to think about my history, even though I knew those stories. And so I had this moment one day, I'm like about to get up to do a keynote and I'm like on the phone, like I have to call my dad real quick, like hold on, because I was like, I need to make sure that I remember this right. Didn't both of your, and then it just dawned on me like, this is also why I'm here, so I have my own personal story, but I know that they are really walking with me. And I sit on the Maternal Mortality Review Committee for California, and I have been for many years. I was on the Maternal Suicide Committee before that. And every time I hear a story of someone who's lost their life in childbirth or postpartum, I know that I am here to tell their stories and to create solutions so that that doesn't happen again, And so I find a lot of value in being able to be a contribution for solutions. And when I connected with Chinyere and BWBJ, I would say that that's when I was birthed as a birth justice specific. I didn't know that term per se, but sitting with them and doing the stories, and they had a cohorts in Northern California where they are, and I was in Southern California, and I was like, I could get a group together, like we could have Southern California as a part of this. So, I brought together, women in the community who had given birth, and we held our own, in healing circle, and I call them healing circles because they were technically a research focus group, but it was just, we were all healed as we listened and shared and encouraged and just, and so it taught me also too, like the power of stories. And I bring that with me, obviously as a psychologist, I hear lots of people's stories. And so I'm going to go back. So my mother was always very interested and supportive in maternal health and kind of like reproductive justice. My grandmother, so my maternal grandmother was also like a reproductive justice advocate in her own way. She supported Planned Parenthood early on when they were first, getting big. So I would say that's like, I guess like in the 60s it would have been, where it was really active in her area. And so I grew up knowing about Planned Parenthood specifically, that I had a right to my body and I had a right to autonomy, like all of this, which was not typical. But my peers, as we were teenagers, people starting to, become sexually active, did not have this education. And I was listening to my friends say stuff that I was like, that's not true. You definitely can get pregnant if you do that. Now that you're pregnant, do you know that you have options? Like just, diseases that were coming up, among folks. And so I went down to Planned Parenthood because they kind of solicited at the high school, like, we're your aunties, and they were all Black and brown women in New Jersey. I grew up out here actually. So yes, I grew up in Teaneck, New Jersey, where she now lives, which is all the synchronicity. Yeah. And they were just like, this isn't about us controlling anything. We just want you to have information. Back in the day, so I'm 41. So whatever they would teach us in sex ed was like kind of basic, right? Like you weren't really going to know about how to operate with the sex ed class. And they realized that they were getting, the consequences of this poor education of reproductive life. And so they came and like, they said, if you come over here, we could do a workshop on your body and your clitoris and, all these things that were interesting. And like, I want to know about that. And so I went and I took friends and I started being the person that brought everybody to Planned Parenthood, which turned into, I brought them there because they had an itch or some questions, or they wanted to test their boyfriend who they thought was unfaithful, or they want, and then sometimes people got pregnant, and then it was like, well, where do we go? So at that time, Planned Parenthood did not do abortions. I didn't even realize that Planned Parenthood did abortion until I moved to California, because where I was, that wasn't their function. They were completely preventative in education. And so they could whisper to us where it was, but it was almost like It was underneath. It wasn't, I don't know if it was, I don't know what the like political and legality situation was when I was growing up, but it was, it was a hidden location that I was given access to because they trusted me. And then I would take people if they need to go. And so I'm 17. When I got my driver's license, I had a car. And sometimes, it'd be, but I was like, well, you can't go by yourself. Like, because then I researched it. I thought, what happens when you have an abortion? Can you walk after? So I became terribly interested in everything that I could do to sort of know about it. And one of my best friends got pregnant when we were 17. And I was like, well, I'll support you. Like, I'll be there and I'll just help with everything. I don't know why I thought I knew how to be a doula, but it was in me that like I could be there and I could support her. And so, I was harassing her the whole pregnancy. How are you feeling? What's going on? Are you feeling tender? And then eventually, when she went into labor, she called me. I was at the house. I watched, and you talked about teenage parents, this very healthy, we were dancers, we were cheerleaders, we were Terps, and Terpsies, we were very healthy young women. We stayed at the house, laughed. Her mother and her older sister, who also had been a teen mom, and her mother had also been a teen mom. So it was interesting because it was a vibe in the house like, this is not that serious, girl. We just about to do what we all have done, and then we're going to have a baby. And so that was my first birth, is like there at this house with everybody just like laughing and distracting her and making jokes until they're like, no, we're not going to the hospital. Now that's not the grunt. And then at some point it was like, yeah, she might be ready to go. Like this is, and so it's like, okay, well, who's going to take her? So-and-so got to go to work. The other person got to pick up the kids. And it's like, all right, well, I'll go. And so I was there with her at the hospital at the beginning when she was there before everybody could get back to the hospital because they had to manage the rest of the house and all the other kids. And I was her doula, and I, was there with her. I was holding her leg, and I was instructed and intuitively doing things. And, she pushed out this baby very easily, and it was like it was so like simple. And I was like, that's birth. This is great. This is amazing. Like easy. Everybody's there. Mother, sister, me, whoever else was in the room. Like there was no rigidity to it. So fast forward, I am now 24, pregnant with my first child. I'm married, I'm in graduate school. So like a lot of the things, all the things together, I'm healthy. And I'm thinking, okay, I want to have my own natural experience, and I'm learning about healthcare. And I'm like, I don't think I'm gonna be able to get anything that I want there. They're already talking to me at the hospital tour about all the interventions that they may do and that they're going to want me to sign stuff to agree before. And I'm like, I need people to be on my vision. I need everybody to be I'm going to have a vaginal birth. I don't need medication. I feel very confident in myself. And if I need something, obviously this is America. There's people there that could do stuff, but why are we preparing for that? Like, so somebody mentioned that I should have a doula, which I didn't know the word. And then this sweet older Black woman, Angela Brown, is my doula. And she's like, I'm going to show you some births so that you could see some easy, natural images of like what this can be, variations. It was all like to help me calm my anxiety. It was like, you don't need to do anything with your body special. Your body can do the thing, but you do need to be in a place where you feel like this is safe, because if you feel afraid, your body's going to do the fight or flight, and it's not going to be as easy to give birth when, the body thinks a lion is coming. It shuts down, it's very, very evolutionary the way our bodies respond. And so with her support and, creating a space, I found midwives that work with a local hospital, because then I realized, I have to pay for this. And so I'm calling local midwives to see if I can have a home birth, and it's like $10,000, $6,000. And I'm like, I don't have any money. I also didn't have insurance because I was healthy and I didn't know you need to have insurance. And I was too old to have my parents' insurance. And so then I had to get the government insurance. And, it was like, there was a local clinic, and the whole thing was like, I had choices because I knew I could in my heart, and I made options for myself. But if I didn't have the wherewithal, if I didn't have connections, if I didn't have a community that would support me, I was thinking, what are people doing who don't know how to make a solution for themselves? So once I had my birth experience, which was vaginal and baby was born healthy, 7-hour birth, by the way, first child, second one, 3 hours. And the only reason I say that, not that time matters, but I really know that my lining up with the process and feeling aligned to it, like making sure that I had people that I felt safe around and that I had curated this environment, I feel like it made a huge difference in my ability to move through the process without difficulty, because I felt safe. And that safety I have use as a tool, as a doula, to help people really achieve the best birth they can achieve. And you're not going to do that when you're in terror. And unfortunately, the hospital system and doctors in their training are not geared to create an environment that feels like you're just going to lay down or stand up or squat and just release the baby. Like, it doesn't feel like that for most people. It's like, you're gonna, and then, you know, and it's like all this energy that is totally not the vibe. So, you know, long story short, I also became a doula in addition to being a psychologist, and have done many things in that work. And I wanted to, at some point, make sure that all the knowledge that I had gained in all of my work, that I could share it. And so I started doing trainings, and those turned into, you know, lectures at different places, and bringing people across the table between the hospitals and nurses that were interested in having a different approach, to be in conversation with birth workers, to be in conversation with birthing people. Like, here, read Battling Over Birth. Like, you know, people want to do a policy. I want you to read all of these stories first and then think about this policy, because when you bring the stories in, it's not abstract anymore. You really can make interventions that are actually more meaningful. And so we do lots of work related to that now, both with BWBJ and with the nonprofit. Okay, so what I want to say about our chapter is that the chapter on doulas, a lot of it was set during the pandemic, when we were writing this. And so we're in the pandemic. The hospitals say you basically have to go in by yourself. So you can't have your partner. So you're alone. A lot of people for their first birth. The hospital's already chaotic because they're low staff. People are terrified about, you know, getting, you know, COVID. It happened several times that, well, because I work with a lot of community doulas in California. And so I'm like a mentor, and people will call and we triage scenarios where we would get a call and the doula's in the parking lot saying that I have to sit with them and like labor with them because they're not letting her in because they say she's not active enough. They only want people that are basically almost to pushing their baby out because they don't have enough room, and they're whatever. So it was like wartime crisis. It was really like a bizarre scenario in the birth world in a lot of places. And so people were calling doulas, anybody that knew anything about birth. Like, I don't know what to do. You know, I'm at home. I'm not going to the hospital. Do you have any suggestions? The doctors aren't picking up because they're super busy. So even like if you had regular visits, now you're not having them in person. They're doing them on Zoom. So you already typically in a doctor's visit get 15 minutes. Then at the end, they're like, do you have any questions? While they're like facing the door, right? And so you already feel like, I don't really have time. And then you're on Zoom, right? Like, so it's like, you don't even have the rapport. So people are just confused, and they're calling doulas left and right. I'm getting calls. Mama Linda's getting calls. Everybody's getting calls. And so we're like, we need to create a hotline. Like, we need to organize this so that people can just call doulas and just have the doulas help them get to the information, and not medical stuff. I mean, if it gets medical, you need to go to a medical provider, a midwife or, you know, OB. But there's a lot of things that people were confused about that doulas could give information and be a support. And so we create a hotline as a part of one of the initiatives. We created scholarships with a local philanthropist organization, California Healthcare Foundation, gave us money to just, they were like, what can we do to help? This is looking crazy in the birth world. And we're like, well, the doulas are available. They now don't have jobs because nobody can go to the hospital, or, you know, so the doulas are out of work. If you could give us scholarships, the doulas will be supporting these Black families throughout California. And so we were able to give 50 scholarships to Black doulas to support Black families in California. Then people couldn't get out to get food after. So in the postpartum period, you know, you need nutrition, you need all this stuff. And it's like everybody, they've got, you know, I don't know where it was, how it was here, but it's like, I remember like Trader Joe's it was open from 9 to 12 for seniors. And then like other people could come for 2 hours. It was like, you couldn't even go to the store. And I wasn't up on Amazon. I wasn't sure how to Instacart yet. Like, one of my elder friends taught me how to do that because she had been doing it already. But it was like, how am I supposed to feed myself? Like, how, you know, and then people were scared to go because maybe you're going to bring COVID back. So we created 6 weeks, 40 days, or 6 weeks postpartum meals for people in our program as well. And with local Black restaurants that, you know, would curate warm meals for them so that they could have it. I also was able to solicit Will Smith's nonprofit foundation, the Just Waters, that actually comes out of his son's work. And so I was like, could you donate waters for, you know, the moms so that we could give it to them? And they were like, yeah, well, we're happy to help. So we just got anybody to support in ways that we can support the community. And I'm saying all that to say, like, when we think about solutions, the solutions are so much in the community. Like when stuff hits the fan and the government fails you and the checks don't come and nobody's opening the doors and it's all these official things and it's legality and your neighbor and your sister and if they understand a little bit of how to help you, people will really help. And the way that Black doulas came in during this crisis time, and many of them did volunteer work. Lots of people gave clothes off their back, gave their babies clothes to people, gave their own food. It was a challenge, but it was so beautiful to be a part of that and to be able to curate like organization around it so that they also weren't alone. And so one of the last thing I'll say is that we created a Black birth worker forum so that doulas could come and talk about what it's like to be on the front lines of birth work and how to support each other, vicarious trauma, solutions for challenging situations, the DV scenario, but I still want to go, but he said he's gonna, if I come back, it's like, how do you manage, some practical scenarios with a lot of the social determinants that come up. And we coach each other with multi-generations, different, levels of experience. It's free for folks. I keep getting people to donate, and anytime a funder is like, well, can we support? Yes, give me money so that I can, just hold this space, for Black women, and anybody who's a Black birth worker is able to attend and get mentorship and support. So I'll stop there.
I just got so nervous. So many like powerful stories to come behind. Oh my goodness. And I thought I knew what I was going to say. And now I'm like, what do I actually want to say? Well, okay, yes. So I'm Haela Cole. I'm very, very happy to be here. Super honored to be on the panel. I guess the easiest way is just to start with my story. And yeah, I think my entree into birth justice was twofold, both through a little thing. I'm like, there we go. Both through my personal birth journey and story, but also through community organizing. And both of those are connected. So my daughter is also in the back. She's my first. I'm going to embarrass her. Yeah, I had a similar story to Lynn. I mean, I considered myself a young mother as well. I was 22, but yeah, very different from your story in that I was from a really small town. I live in Connecticut now, but I'm from Texas. I'm from a very small country town in Texas. Grew up, very simply, with single mother, super religious, very uncomfortable talking about sex and birth and, so I just grew up kind of bebopping along, not really knowing, much about anything really. Very sheltered, got into college at the University of Texas at Austin and lost my mind, because it's like freedom, still doing good grades, things like that. And then the summer after I graduated with my undergrad, I ended up getting pregnant. And I think that, and I write a little bit about it in my chapter, but just that process of thinking about like what it means, like how it changes my life, it was the beginning of me rethinking even like who I was, what what I valued. There was a lot of shame because of my upbringing, I was actually, although I have a PhD now, I was in law school. So I was starting law school in the fall and like didn't really know what I should do. And, tried to talk to my mom about it. And she's like, you'll be fine. Like it's not a question of what the choices are, right? It's like, this is what's going to happen. And it was definitely transformative for me. I mean, one of the first things, and I'll backtrack. I think what's interesting, and you'll see kind of my growth and transition, is that throughout my life, I saw things happening, not only with me, but with my mother and like hearing stories of my family, but like didn't have the language or analysis to really put the pieces together and describe like these patterns that I'm seeing. And so little things would stand out to me. Like I said, it's in the chapter, but I would go to the doctor and
I was feeling really insecure because I knew that I felt like when I walked into the clinic, they were like, oh, there's this young Black single young woman. And I would do really odd things like, well, I'm in law school, right? Like hoping that it would like change their perception of me, just like really leaning into those respectability politics, hoping that it would change my treatment, but not even thinking, well, why do I even feel the need that I have to do this, you know? Or like, I remember I was young enough to be on my mom's insurance. And so I was like, I'm going to pick a nice hospital. They didn't really have birth centers at the time that I was even aware of. And the doctor's like, well, what's your birth plan? And I was like, what do you mean? Like, what does that mean? I was like, well, I've heard about like natural birth. Like, tell me about that. Like, what if I don't want to have an epidural? And the doctor says, that's what technology is for. Like that's what these developments are for. Like, you should just have the epidural. Like, don't worry about it. And I was like, okay, like, you know. So it wasn't a complicated birth, but I wasn't I was super naive about the process. I didn't know what my options are, that I had choices really. Luckily everything was fine. My beautiful baby girl, I literally tell her this all the time. Like, I remember her first cry and I was like, oh my gosh, like there's this human. And so then I ended up dropping out of law school. A lot of shame around that too. Like what does it mean to be like walking around pregnant in law school and like navigating that and asking questions, and I'm unmarried and like all of these things. Interestingly, I dropped out because I started talking to other mother lawyers and learning about their lives and things like that. And I realized that's not the life that I want for myself and for my child, and not the mother that I want to be. Looking back on that, I'm like, wow, like it changed the way that I made decisions. I started to think differently about what I wanted for myself. And that's like the piece of the transformation that I didn't even realize was happening, but it was happening all through this experience of pregnancy and birth. So I ended up going to grad school, and I'm literally dropping out of law school and applying to graduate school at the same time. So the next fall after my daughter's born, I start graduate school with a 6-month-old in tow, single mom, 6-month-old. And I'm in class, and I had kind of been activated politically, I guess, in undergrad. The University of Texas at Austin had an amazing Black Studies program. I mean, I was pretty much politicized, really, and given that language and critical lens that I was trying to find but hadn't found yet in undergrad. So that carried with me into graduate school. And I'm in one of my classes. There's another student who started with me. She's like a sister to me now, who also had a 4-month-old. So we like linked up real quick. And we're in class, and one of the fellow students is like, hey, like there's this group in town, and you two seem like you would fit in really well. I think you should check them out. And we're like, what is this group? And he's like, well, it's called Mamas of Color Rising. And they're basically these like badass organizers and activists, and they're mothers, and you should check them out. So me and Sade, that's the other girl's name that had a baby, we were like, let's go together, check it out. They have this like potluck meet and greet. And we went, and I like to say like the rest is history at that point. So Mamas of Color Rising was this all volunteer organizing collective of mothers of color. And when I got there, they had been surveying women in the WIC clinic to find out, what do women in Austin, Travis County, like, what do they need? What are their challenges? What do they need help with? What can we do? What's the issue we want to really take on? And through that, they found that kind of like the connection point between everyone was, of course, like their pregnancy and birth experience, and decided to choose kind of reproductive justice as the topic for the work. That's when I came in. They were already doing that work. And so I began to organize and work with them in Texas. So that was really how I got into the birth justice movement. So yes, through my own personal birth, but because I wouldn't have been a part of Mamas of Color Rising if I hadn't had a kid. But I think that they brought me into the movement piece of it. And we did so many things. I mean, we trained Black and brown women to be doulas and to give free birth support in the community. And we did other things, like kind of what you're talking about, like responded to the needs of women. We had like clothes drives, we had, events, we had childcare, we had food, like, all those kind of like day-to-day support things. But we did a bunch of other stuff too. We lobbied around legislation. And ultimately, one of our goals was to start a free prenatal clinic for Black and brown women, and we ended up doing that. And it's still up and running. It's called Mama Sana Vibrant Woman. So that was my entrance into the movement. But I think, and I write about this, and I talk about Mamas of Color Rising, and I do mention the disparities. And full transparency, my doctoral dissertation is about maternal and infant health disparities. So I ended up researching disparities in Texas in particular, which is like the belly of the beast in so many ways, so there was a lot happening in Texas around these disparities. And so as we were organizing, I also was doing kind of like a community-based research project in collaboration with the mamas. But I think the thing that I've taken most from my work with Mamas of Color Rising and birth justice is more about, I think that our lens, we always say like building the just and loving world that we're trying to see. That's the mantra behind it. And those women that I worked with and organized with, they're like family to me. Like they're basically my kids' cousins. And I've been a single mother since the beginning, and they were my community, my support system. Like we were together all the time. And part of one of the members of the organization who is amazing, I've learned so much about organizing through these women, Paola Rojas. She's also connected to Insight. We were like sister organizations with Insight. And she always talked about birth as an entry point for transformation and resistance. And that always stuck with me. And it's more than just an individual moment of transformation and resistance. It's really about love, which is what I write about, but like radical love and how we use radical love to inform the way in which we relate to one another, the ways in which we understand ourselves, and how that changes the world, right? And changes our society and changes our communities. And if you think about it, like, okay, let's say we're talking about disparities, right? We know Black women are 3 to 4 more times, likely to die. We see the disparities with infant mortality. There's so much research out there that talks about racism-induced stress over the life course, like all of these things, right? And then we see models like the model in Mama Sana or Jenny Joseph, and they're talking about support and care and love and how that literally impacts the body, And so that I feel is what, yes, I've been involved in like the organizing and the support directly, but for me, that is what really sits with me the most from birth justice. Because if we can't, one, a black reproductive body and the violence that we experience and the attacks from all different angles, if we can, one, disrupt those systems by loving ourselves radically and by loving each other radically, like that is, to me, like the most powerful piece of it. And so, and interestingly, it took that lens for me to look back at my own birth experience and be like, oh, I was trying to do that. Like, I didn't know that that's what I was trying to do with my own journey, by asking questions, by making decisions for myself and for my child, that I was like beginning that process. I didn't have the language for it, but it was happening. And so that's what I that's why I have fallen in love with birth justice. It's that piece of it, because it's yes, we want babies to live and women to live, but we also want to change like the world,
Yes.
right? And it's like it's one of many entry points, I feel like, into that. And so for my piece, it was actually in the first edition. So I wrote it a long time ago when my baby girl was really little. And one of my really good friends who was part of Mamas of Color Rising, her name is Kelly. She's literally one of my best friends. We used to sit around and talk about radical love all the time and what that looked like. And I thought, okay, like I could write an academic piece, but I don't really want to do that. So if I wrote a personal piece, like what would it be? And so as I was thinking about radical love, I thought, if I could tell my daughter about this, what would I say to her? And so that's how the piece came about. A love letter to my daughter. Love is a political act. She hasn't read it yet. I feel like now she's probably old enough to read it and understand what I'm trying to say. But, how do I tell her my experience and not impose like in a negative way, but like so that she understands the importance of that radical love? And also she's empowered to decide for herself, like what that looks like and how she chooses to love and how she even empowers others through her own like choices around that. And so that was my inspiration for the piece. So hope that wasn't all over the place, but sure. I didn't, yeah, I have it marked in her. I will read a short piece of it, sure. Okay, so I'll read just a little excerpt. Okay. So what does all of this have to do with love? What happens when love finds a way to exist where it was never meant to be? What happens when love blossoms where life is not meant to be or where you are not meant to survive? What happens when choosing to love is in actuality an act of agency and resistance? What happens when we love ourselves enough to live? Amid oppressive interactions with medical professionals and alongside the evocation of a painful, forgotten history, I attempt to create a gentle and loving environment in a world that responds violently to my existence. Taking long walks in the Texas heat to hasten labor or assertively questioning dominant practices are attempts at self-protection and autonomy over my body, and the decision to love and care for myself informs these actions. In a world set up to maintain a particular racialized, gendered, and hierarchical order that brings Black women face to face with violence and death, choosing to love and care for oneself despite these things is undoubtedly a radical and ultimately political act of survival. What I find most profound is that my intentional choice to love myself manifested in episodes interrelated with reproduction and my body. It was most pronounced around my experience of pregnancy and birth. Although there were other critical moments in my life, one of the most powerful sites of self-realization and politicization was the historical and contemporary site of subjugation for Black women, my body, and reproductive capacity. For me, it seemed that everything had built up to that point. Pregnancy and birth highlighted how self-love and care contribute to my own preservation, the preservation of my child, my family, and others. During this time, the fatal repercussions of not loving, caring, and advocating for myself had never been clearer, and this was the beginning.
It's not easy to go last. I'm really touched by everybody's stories. My name is Biani Perez. I use she, they pronouns. And I was also, I wrote in the first edition. So it was interesting to face the younger version of me who wrote this essay, and I'm sitting here struck by how we're talking about birth and we're talking about these babies that we birth, but we're like also birthing versions of ourselves too. And I'm like really hearing that as I listen to each of you and feeling such deep gratitude, because birth justice work is everybody's concern, right? Because we all are connected and tied to birth work. I am a therapist, a doula. I'm also a mama of 3. So when I wrote this essay, it was the experience of my first birth experience with my son, who's 12 now, which is like wild. So I'm kind of talking about a younger Biani. I'm 42 now, so I was 30 when I had my son and when I was born again. And my personal journey with birth justice work really began when I found out I was pregnant, to be honest. I grew up in a family that talked about birth in a very natural way. Everybody had, my great grandmother, I was told, was a comadrona. She was a midwife. And so in my family, the idea of going to hospitals was really like a modern concept. I was raised, I'm Dominican, Black Dominican, and it was just very normal to hear the stories of birth. So when I found out I was pregnant, I was mortified, to be honest. I am a survivor of sexual violence, and it feels interesting to be doing this today when April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And I'm sitting with that awareness too, because my birth story is about my journey as a survivor, becoming pregnant and having a baby and deciding to have a baby with that awareness that I wanted to not be afraid of my body and not feel really disconnected from myself in the ways that I had to be when I survived those violent acts. And it's funny because this essay kind of changed the narrative of my life. I became a therapist because I want to work with survivor parents and expecting folks, and that's what I do now. I work with Black and Latina femme and birthing folks and helping them heal from complex trauma. And I think in a lot of ways, if it wasn't for me writing this essay, I wouldn't really be doing this work. So I'm really grateful for that. I'm grateful for Chinyere and my girlfriend, Cody, who sent me the anthology. I was like, oh, this is for academics. You know, I don't have a PhD and like, you know, this is not for me. And she was like, no, you need to tell your story. People need to hear your story too. And I'm really grateful for Cody. Shout out to Cody, who's probably watching on Zoom. And shout out to my partner who really like labored this work with me too. So yeah, it kind of started, I was sort of like, how am I gonna have a baby? Like I can't even really be in my body. I don't even like myself right now, right? Like, what does it mean to birth and to birth the way that I want? And yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I think when I'm hearing people talk about birth justice work and I'm like, oh, it started when I was pregnant with Zen. It probably started when I survived the violence too, because there was so many ways that I knew I had to like disconnect from myself to be with myself. And I think when I talk to other survivors, they're like, yeah, I get that. You know, like this experience that you survive something so difficult that you kind of have to disconnect and dissociate a little bit, just a little bit, so that you can just get by and get through. And so, yeah, this I will share a little bit more about that. I kind of want to start with my call to action, because I think as a therapist and as a Black doula, like hearing people's birth stories is really powerful, but I want to kind of be like, hear your birth story too. Like learn the story of your birth. That's kind of my call to action. And I don't mean just like, I don't mean it in the way that heteronormativity talks about, but like you're becoming, like your story of becoming. I think it's important for us to hear it ourselves, like to hear our stories. So that's sort of my invitation for you all, to think about like the stories of your becoming and who you are in your birth. There was so much more I wanted to say, but yeah, I don't come from the background of doing this work first. Like I really came from, I wanted to tell the story of a survivor mom so that other survivor moms can know that they also have a right to reclamation of their bodies and that they get to decide how they birth. Before I read, I did want to share what's interesting is that I birthed my first at a birth center. I really wanted to have a home birth, but I couldn't afford it. Like you mentioned, some of y'all mentioned, and it was really important for me to have the kind of birth where I was really in my body. So, and that was really scary. because I did not feel like I was really connected to my body. And so there was a lot of work that I did, but really what came down to it was this belief, this deep belief within myself that said, I can really trust myself again. Like if I really go through this with a lot of awareness. And that meant from like being pregnant, being in a pregnant body, being in a racialized gendered body, navigating even the birth center. I birthed my son at a birth center, but most of the midwives were white. It wasn't like I had access to Black midwives because they didn't take my insurance, right? And so what does it mean to birth the way I want in the presence of like white folks, and not feeling like they would hold all of me. But I also had, after that, I had my daughter, had her at the same birth center. My doula didn't make it in time, so I kind of birthed alone. It was a really powerful experience. And then my third baby, I had her at the height of COVID, and it was highly medicalized. I had an emergency C-section, very invasive, mostly alone. And I say that to you because I think a lot of times I've had empowering births, and then I've had births that didn't go the way that I planned. And I'm a doula, right? Like I know all this stuff, and I wanted things to go a certain way, and it didn't happen, right? And I still find a lot of wisdom from that birth too. I find so much strength and beauty and joy and courage and strength, even through the difficulty and the challenge. So yeah, I think I share that because I want to give you context. Like I read this essay a few times this week, and I was like cringing, like, and I think part of the cringe is because there was all this hopefulness, and I love it. I'm hopeful about birth justice. We deserve freedom, especially Black women, Black femmes, Latina femmes, like people of color. And I also hold that it still comes with grief, even when you birth the way you want. There's still parts of you that grieve, like it didn't go the way I had hoped, and that's why the cringing comes. Even though I'm really proud of myself, there's still in a moment of like, oh, but I really wish this happened and that happened, and I didn't have my little flags up in the room, and like I had all these, like my altar wasn't set up, even though I wanted, it's like it still comes with grief, even when you feel like you birthed the way that it was intended. So I'm kind of like rambling, but so this essay was kind of drawn from the wisdom of Audre Lorde, who I consider my cultural and spiritual ancestor. She guides me through and through. And it was inspired by her essay, The Uses of the Erotic. And so when you read the essay, you will see that through, because for me, my birth with Zen was very spiritual, so about me connecting to my pleasure in this birth. And that felt really important as a survivor who felt like that pleasure was taken from them, And so, yeah, there's something about that. So I did some learning, like I was, this was 12 years ago. The business of being born. I was reading a lot about Black doulas, Black midwives. One of my best friends, who's also a doula, who actually wrote in the anthology, she wrote about Afro doulas, Griselda, who's going to be at the panel in Brooklyn. She was my doula, and like I think if it wasn't for my support team, I'm not sure I would have birthed the way it did, And I think that's the part that kind of breaks my heart about what we see happening still. There was another loss of a Black woman who died of sepsis. And like people tell these stories and it's like, oh, this happened because of this medical, but it's not. Like we're the ones that are dying. Like Black femmes and folks of color and birthing folks are the ones that are still dying by things that can really be prevented. And so I hold so much grief and also so much it's a privilege to still be here and doing this work. And then also 12 years later, and we're still having the same conversation, so I'm grateful for each of you for the work that you're doing. And I'm kind of like excited to talk offhand too about ways that we can collaborate too, because I think when I'm thinking about birth work, the mental health component is really important, and postpartum concerns, prepartum concerns, and like it's really not, it hasn't changed, unfortunately. And I really want to be a part of the change when it comes to like offering Black maternal mental health support. But yeah, I will share a little bit. Our erotic knowledge empowers us and becomes the lens through which we reclaim our right to love and be loved. The erotic allowed me to tell my truth, trust my body, and love myself so that I could have the birth of my choosing. What does it mean to be a survivor mother? I have learned that I am more than a collection of events that have happened to me, and that I have agency over my life. In choosing the erotic, I tapped into the deep place within me where my inner awareness led me to strength, courage, and the wisdom to have a memorable birthing story. The power lay within me, and I was able to tap into the inner spiritual force of my ancestors who supported me during the labor. I learned to be present, to embrace courage, to work to understand fear-based beliefs, and to trust my body to help me birth my baby. I no longer birth the pain of my past. I have birthed sexual freedom, and I will continue on this path of healing so that I can help my children gain the same freedom and awareness. As a survivor mother, I remember my past as a place of strength, but I am not controlled by it. Instead, I look within for love, courage, and sexual freedom. Thank you.
Thank you all so very much. I'm sure we could sit for so many more hours. Each one of us, and I'm sure many of you we're so interconnected. We're resonating with one another. And as you said, we all have our own birth stories, and, we birth ourselves through telling them and sharing them with others. I'm very overwhelmed with just appreciation, with gratitude and awe of, the work you do, who you are, what you give to others through this, not just this book, but everything that's behind this book that came before it that made it possible. So we did want to leave some time for questions. I do want to make a couple of announcements too. And we do want you to eat the food that we have for you. That was, very lovingly prepared by a local caterer. So before I open things up, I just wanted to make sure that folks are aware again that we will be continuing this dialogue over the next 2 days. We'll be hosted by an organization known as the Bronx Rebirth Progress and Collective. Bronx Rebirth Collective and Progress. And, some wonderful people and other contributors will be there Saturday from 3 to 5 at the Dream Charter High School on Bruckner Boulevard. So if you want to hear more and continue and have more time to have these conversations, please feel free to join us again. Not everyone will be with us, but Chinyere and Sayida will be at all 3 of the talks because they came all the way from California, and this is a homecoming for Sayida, of course, and they're also enjoying some time in New York. We're sorry about the weather. Sometimes it's a little warmer and sunnier, and hopefully it will be that by the weekend. I also wanted to lift up my colleague and dear friend, Deborah Levine, who's really our host in this immediate space, because I hang out let you know all the in fact, they're going to be hosting one of the Black Mama's Health Week, which happens also in April. You want to share a little bit about that, Deborah? Do you have a mic just to tell folks what's going on
Good
with that?
afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to our house. This is now your home, and feel free to come and join us. On April 11th, we'll be doing the screening of Toxic, a Black woman's story, and a cross-section of birth justice navigators from Queens, Manhattan, and the Bronx will be joining us to do a panel discussion and share their vision. We'll be ending the week on the 17th with a webinar and also an in-person event looking at syphilis and the rise here in New York, and talking with our Department of Health folks about a survey they're doing and building out an intervention, and about how we as the community need to be a part of that process. So they have agreed to allow us to be at the beginning of the conversation. before the questions have been designed and for us to participate. So please get the word out. All of our events are on YouTube, so if you don't catch them here, feel free to join us online, and all of our webinars now have continuing education credits. So please come and join us, because if we're not talking about sexual reproductive justice, we're talking about health as a human right. We are talking about cannabis equity. We're talking about mental health. We're talking about all the things that people sort of feel taboo is out here, but is a safe space in here. So welcome, and thank you, Dr. Roberts, for always creating spaces for us to partner.
Thank you. And as Deborah mentioned, we launched just recently here at the CUNY Graduate School of Public Health and Health Policy what we fondly refer to as the SRJ Hub, which stands for Sexual Reproductive Justice. And so there will be many events like this one sponsored and held, and not only events, but advocacy and research and organizing efforts to deal with a whole host of sexual and reproductive justice issues. We're joined by our Director of Government Affairs in the back here, Danielle Green, who's a fierce advocate with city and state policies. So, you know, we're really trying to do a full-pronged, you know, attack on injustices to lift up justice and joy. We also are proud that we launched in December an endowed professorship named after Billy Avery, the founder of the Black Women's Health Project, now called the Black Women's Health Imperative. She will be our keynote speaker at our commencement this June. And so with that, we'll be also building up. We currently have a specialization in maternal, child, sexual, and reproductive health, and we hope to build that out into a full-fledged academic program at the master's level. So again, we're building here in Harlem. This is a homecoming for me. Over 20 years ago, I directed a program directly down the street across from grad houses. That was a program for mothers who were impacted by the crack cocaine epidemic, many of whom might have had their children removed, but instead we kept their families together for providing treatment and support. I'm still in touch with some of those mothers. I get a daily text from them, and they're thriving. They're grandmothers like I am now. So again, this is full circle to be here in this space and to be doing this work. It's always evolving and growing, and I'm glad that you all came out tonight. Yesterday was quite a storm. It got a little lighter and not quite warmer, but at least a little brighter today. And we think that's all because we all were meant to be here this evening. Not everyone who RSVP'd is in the room. Maybe they're on Zoom, so thank you for being with us there too. And again, I couldn't be more pleased to share a moment in conversation with some of the most powerful people I know. And I love all of you for that. Please eat. Also, please get this book and share it with your friends. They also, if you go to their website, maybe you can tell us exactly what it is, but really, you know, Google Black Women Birthing Justice, BWBJ. We are, yes. Can we go to the last slide? I'm sorry. Thank you. Yes, it's all there.
The last slide, it has information.
It has yeah, it's going to loop again. And then there's 2 codes for the first book and the current, and there are discounts tied to those books. And we have a few copies here, right, for sale if you want to purchase one, but it's going to be, don't rush. And we have some tote bags too. I don't know.
It's in the black.
It's what the books were in. Yeah, I think it's, no, I think it's in the green room.
So there are tote bags, which are really cute. So we encourage you, they're $5. We also have a few copies of the book for you to buy here. There we go. Let's hold up the tote bag. And
Come on.
no, that's not it. It's inside there. There we go. And if we can go to the last slide, please. Thank you.
You might have to.
Oh, it's not moving.
Okay.
Okay, so there's the bag. And what's this say on there? What are the words on here? Can you read it out for us? On the right-hand side, Black birth.
Black birth, Black liberation, and Black joy.
You know, you want that, you need to be done. And then we do have some discount codes, some QR codes that will give you a discount if you want to order the book online. So you could order the book from Routledge directly and you will have a discount of 25%. Or you could order Battling Over Birth directly. It's right here. Oh, there you go. So you can order Birthing Justice 25% off at Routledge, or you can order Battling Over Birth with 35% off. Those QR codes will take you to two different publishers because they're published by two different books. So don't try to order the wrong book from the wrong place. Well, we encourage you to do that. And really to let people know that this is available to them. It's for a limited period of time that those QR codes will work. And after that, the price gets really expensive again. One of the hard things about publishing with the mainstream publishing world is the books are really expensive now because I guess people started just like not doing books as much. And so we really wanted to get these discounts to you. But Battling Over Birth, we published it with a small independent women's health press. And so it's $20 normal price or $10 for the ebook, which is like a super discounted price. And then this is 35% off that too. So those are available to you. So are we going to do, are we? Oh, the covers, let's just say this on the right, in the pink, that is one of the mamas that was photographed by Mama Linda, my doula, and one of the co-founders of Black Women Birthing Justice. She's a doula, and she also takes photos of her mamas. And so we loved that. We thought it showed a lot about Black joy, right? Birth as joy. And then on the left-hand side is another photo that was actually contributed by one of the women who shared at one of the sharing circles. And we just thought it was just a precious moment that we wanted to show that, yeah, it's intergenerational. And when we have that, when we give that gift of a powerful, beautiful birth experience, it impacts everyone in the family and in all the generations to come. So, yeah. Are we going to do a couple of questions from the audience? They've been sitting so patiently. Yeah. Questions? Comments? Questions? And would you like to just say your name when you say your question? Because we'd love to know who you are.
My name is Ayana Lowe, and I was very moved by the stories and about how the power of love, it seems to be the energy that really helps you get through things.
Okay. Oh yeah, the power of love. Can you talk about some of the statistics of what white women, and the difference between what they experience and how bad things are for brown people? Oh, can you just talk a little bit about that?
I'll say a couple of words and then somebody can talk more specifically because there was a report out in New York that probably has a lot of the details here. But in general, so let me just preamble though. So one of the things that we are very aware is that some of this data can create this culture of fear and that Black women becomes terrified of giving birth or of dying. And so that they then will kind of follow all the instructions and do all the things, right? So we just want to preamble it by saying that the vast majority of Black births end up with a healthy mama, healthy baby, and that Black women are capable of pushing out healthy babies and being healthy themselves. We just always start with that, right? And also, Black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die of pregnancy-related causes than white women in this country, right? Our infants are twice as likely to die before their first birthday as white infants, right? We also know that for Latinx communities, those are also some disparities, which are somewhere in the middle of those, right? And then in particular boroughs, it's even worse. We also know that Black women are more likely to have interventions like C-section, what they call low-risk C-section, which we call unnecessary C-section, right? There's no such thing as what they mean is that the birth wasn't at risk, but they had a C-section anyway. But a C-section is always more risky than not because it's the surgery, right? Yes. And then we also know that Black women are less likely to access what's called a VBAC, which is a vaginal birth after cesarean, which basically means that if you had a C-section first, they say once a C-section, always a C-section. If you had they don't tell you that when you're having your first baby and they say, oh, we're going to do a C-section, it's going to be very hard for you to then have a vaginal birth afterwards. You have got scar tissue inside, and some people don't feel comfortable or confident in actually supporting you and having that vaginal birth. But it is possible to have a healthy VBAC. And in fact, there's an organization called Black Women Do VBAC because we want to educate people to know that. So the statistics, did I miss any of the statistics? Oh, the higher rates of preeclampsia and other basic preterm birth. So it's a long, long list. All the things that you don't want out of your pregnancy, unfortunately, we have a much higher proportion. And a lot of that is preventable. And a lot of that, if you know, then you can actually take the steps to keep yourself safe, right? What else?
I would just say that 80 to 90% of all of those, when they do the statistics, are 3 to 4 times more likely. 80 to 90% are preventable. And that has been identified by the CDC and almost every single maternal mortality review committee that's looking at the cases, of which I sit. And many of us, we sit around and we're like, yes, this was a preventable birth, a negative birth outcome. And so that's so important to pair, like when people are thinking about it, because what we're also inspired to do is use the information for what it could be. So if the statistic that even if C-section is essential when it's needed, it's 3 times more risky for death than a vaginal birth. It's a surgery of major body parts, right? The risk of sepsis, the risk of bleeding, the risk, all the things. If you watch the news for how many people die, the majority are dying after a C-section. Very important to note. So America also has higher rates of C-section than any other first world nation, higher rates than most non-identified as, third world or developing nation. I mean, America is on the lower spectrum of good maternal care across. So, and one of the biggest things is that we have a really high C-section rate and what's considered to be globally non-essential C-sections. And so we are not training providers to assist with birth in a way that can be done without surgery. Where, Chinyere mentioned, midwives, because they don't do C-sections, their whole training is about how to get you from start to finish without needing that, because that's not what I can do. So I know everything possible to do so that that doesn't happen. If you have surgery tools in your hand and a system that says this is actually $30,000, if you do that vaginal birth, it's only $10,000, right? And if you have a system that incentivizes financially surgery and in all the other interventions, you don't just get the surgery, you get anesthesiology, you get all the other follow-up care. I mean, and when it's essential, you are so thankful for all those people. I had amazing anesthesiologists in a room, cheering for this person to have a successful outcome that they could have because they've had an emergency, right? So we know we need our providers, but we don't need unnecessary things in our system. And so that kind of speaks to the statistic and yeah.
So then what we always want to do when we start with the statistics is jump to the 80, 90% preventable. And then we jump to, so what do you need to do? So it's not about being paralyzed in fear and terror, right? And then showing up and being kind of like a lamb to the slaughter, like, well, I have to follow everything they're going to say because I'm in fear. But instead it's about, okay, so we know that midwife-assisted births are far less likely to have a C-section, to have these kind of interventions. So start there. Right? We know that if you do feel you need to go to a hospital, you can find a hospital that has midwives. You can look up and find out what is the C-section rate. It's bizarre to me that hospitals have different C-section rates, but they have the same women are going in, right? So are you going to pick the hospital with the 60% C-section rate or the hospital with a 25% C-section rate, right? You don't always have a choice. I understand that. But so there's stuff that you can do to educate yourself and your community so that you're making those choices. Get a doula. Doulas, like midwives, are trained in many different methods, which doctors just don't have, in how to help you to get in the positions that will help you, right, to have that natural birth. So there's so many different pieces that are in your power to have, right? And so that you don't end up in that situation. Now, if we do become in an emergency situation, then like Sayida said, then of course we want to go and follow all of those things. But even then, having that doula there can actually support you because you're going to be able to advocate for yourself. You're going to know what your rights are, right? It's kind of like you don't go, I don't know, would any of you go, I mean, let's just call out the Black community. Would we go into a police station without knowing your rights? No. I don't think so, right? Like say there was a warrant on your cousin and you had to go to the police station with them because look, come on, let's just go. You're going to find out all your rights first and you're going very prepared, right? Same way, we don't go into a hospital as a Black woman who's pregnant without knowing your rights. And that's the kind of way we have to start thinking, right? That these places can be sites of dangerous outcomes for us.
Yeah.
What I'm gonna suggest, because we actually have to clear this room out at a certain time. I know, but you know what? We're still here. Continue, join us in the Bronx and in Brooklyn. And come up and ask these same questions you have that you're waiting to ask while we get something to eat. Thank you all.